حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد أشهد أن عليا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله لي يا مساء الصلاة والنسك الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من ألف شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا واعفنا واعف عنا في الدنيا والآخرة إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد سبحان الله لا إله سبحان الله لا إله سبحان الله لا إله الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. صلوات.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أنصاره وعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله. سبحان الله. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله. سبحان الله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد، ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ارزقنا زيارة الحسين، وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين. دعاء إمام الزمان. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. صلوات.
Inshallah, ziyarat will be recited at the end of the program. Let us please start setting up for the program to come with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Let us begin tonight's program with the recitation of the Holy Quran. And I would like to invite Brother Ali Zain to please come forward and recite the Quran, and then a marsiya following that. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول صدق الله العلي العظيم. बारे दीगर नारे सलावात. क्या रहा ख़ैमों में शह के एक उदासी रह गई. क्या रहा ख़ैमों में शह के एक उदासी रह गई. क्या रहा ख़ैमों में शह के एक उदासी रह गई. क्या रहा ख़ैमों में शह के एक उदासी रह गई. सिर्फ रोने को मोहम्मद की नवासी रह गई. सज गई कासिम के टुकड़ों से उधर कर वो बला. सज गई कासिम के टुकड़ों से उधर के वो बला, माँ इधर बेटे की दुल्हन को सजाती रह गई। छीनता था शेम्र चादर और ज़ैनब बार बार, अरे छीनता था शेम्र चादर और ज़ैनब बार बार अपनी चादर के मुहाफिज को बुलाती रह गई। खून दिल अब्बास का सब बह गया रण में मगर, खून दिल अब्बास का सब बह गया रण में मगर, दिल में बस एक बात ज़ैनब की रिदा की रह गई। ए मुसलमानों तुम्हारी गैरतें क्या हो गई, ए मुसलमानों तुम्हारी गैरतें क्या हो गईं, तुम तमाशाई थे ज़ैनब, मुँह छुपाती रह गई। हर तमाचे पर सकीना मुँह पे रख कर नन्हे हाथ, हर तमाचे पर सकीना मुँह पे रख कर नन्हे हाथ, नील रुख सारों के गाजी को दिखाती रह गई। क्या रहा खैमों में शह के एक उदासी रह गई। बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात।
Jazakallah, brother Ali Zain. One more loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. I would now like to request brother Zain Husayn to please come forward and recite a salam with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah.
बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात। अकबर तुम्हें मालूम है क्या मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। अकबर तुम्हें मालूम है क्या मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। इस आलम में गुर्बत में तुम्हें जान दूँ कैसे। इस दश्त मुसीबत में तुम्हें जान दूँ कैसे। इस वक्त क़यामत में तुम्हें जान दूँ कैसे। ए लाल जो तुम में दिन विक़ा मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। अकबर तुम्हें मालूम है क्या मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। क्या गुज़रेगी इस बाप के दिल पर नहीं सोचा। तुमने मेरी जान ली अकबर नहीं सोचा। मर जाऊंगा मैं तुझसे बिछड़ कर नहीं सोचा। तुम मुझसे ज़ईफ़ी का आसा मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। अकबर तुम्हें मालूम है क्या मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग नाना की जियारत को तड़प था नवासा। ए लाल तुझे इसलिए खालिक से था मांगा, मकबूल हुई मेरी दुआ मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। एक रोज तुझे आने की मांगा था पुफी ने, 18 बरस नाजों से पाला था पुफी ने। बेटों से भी ज़्यादा तुम्हें चाहा था फूफी ने। एहसान जो ज़ैनब ने किया मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। अकबर तुम्हें मालूम है क्या मांग रहे हो। तुम बाप से मरने की रिज़ा मांग रहे हो। बर मोहम्मद वाल मोहम्मद सलवात।
Jazakallah, brothers. And one more loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. I would like to request Brother Hassan Abbas to please come forward and recite a salam with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
भारती का सलवात अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद व अज्जल। मन रोएगी तुम्हें ओ नो मोहम्मद क्यों कह। मान रोएगी तुम्हें ओ नो मोहम्मद क्यों कह। जब मदीने में नजर आएगी वीरानी ये घर, मान रोएगी तुम्हें ओ नो मोहम्मद क्यों कह। जब के जिंदान में तू दोनों कसर आया था, मैं न रोई थी तुम्हें तुमको गिला तो होगा। माफ करना जो आगे हो सके लख्ते जिगर मान रोएगी तुम्हें ओ नो मोहम्मद क्यों कर मुझसे पूछेंगे जो अब्दुल्ला कहाँ गए बच्चे क्या वजह है मेरी नजरों से निगाह गए बच्चे क्या जवाब को ये माँ देगी मेरे नूर नजर माँ न रोएगी तुम्हें ओ नो मोहम्मद क्यों कर हुजरे देखूंगी तुम्हें तुमको तड़प जाऊंगी किस तरह से दिल बेताब को जाऊंगी अब नहीं लौट के आएंगी मेरे रश के कमर मान रोएगी तुम्हें ओ नो मोहम्मद क्यों कर जब मदीने में नजर आएगी वीरानी घर मान रोएगी तुम्हें ओ नो मोहम्मद क्यों कर सलावत
Jazakallah, Brother Hassan. One more loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected Sayyid, Sheikh, elders, brothers and sisters in faith, Assalamu alaikum. Before I invite the Sayyid to ascend the mimbar, just a quick reminder that tomorrow we will be celebrating Eid al-Zahra here at CFK with Sheikh Mahdi Rastani, inshallah. The program will begin with Salatul Maghribain, followed by the recitation of the Holy Quran and celebratory poetry and mankabat, and then a short speech by the Sheikh. The program will end with ziyarat and to go niyaz. I would like to request everyone to please recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of tonight's program sponsors, the marhumin of Brother Rizwan and Batul, the marhum Dr. Sayyid Kazim Musfi, and the marhumin of Brother Sajid and Azra Kazmi. Let us please also include our own marhumin and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I would now like to request the Sayyid to please ascend the member with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. فاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل، نعم المولى ونعم النصير. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله الآخر أهدي مني لزيارتكم. Everyone together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. This majlis in which we have gathered here, in which we are commemorating, it's a very important majlis because this is the final majlis of this season of Aza, the season of mourning and remembering Abi Abdullah al-Husayn. And because it is the final majlis, we may find some feelings of ambivalence inside of us. We may be thinking for the last 2 months that we've been coming to this Farsh Aza, we've been crying for Imam Husayn, we've been remembering Imam al-Husayn, and we may be asking ourselves that have we done enough for this cause? Have we done enough for the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam? Have we truly expressed our loyalty and our love? And so these feelings and these emotions, they come up. And these are important feelings and important emotions. First and foremost, we have to be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He selected us and that He honored us by attending these majalis of Abi Abdullah al-Husayn. There are many people, there are many good people who don't have the ma'rifat of the Imam, who don't have ma'rifat of what happened in Karbala, the ma'rifat of the Ahlul Bayt, and they are deprived of what these majalis are. They are deprived of what treasure they're missing in these majalis. These majalis in which we come, which we remember Imam al-Husayn, these are those events in which we will cherish the most when we leave this realm of existence and we go into the akhirah. When we go to akhirah, we will remember these moments. We will remember these moments as the finest moments. These will be the moments that that enhance our faith, that raise our iman and bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so these are a form of a special mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected us as recipients. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we express our appreciation and gratitude that we were granted this honor. Among the greatest blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this majlis in which we gather, in which we weep for Imam al-Husayn. These majlis, without any doubt, if the Imam was with us, he would also be in this gathering. There's a beautiful hadith from Imam as-Sadiq where he says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, where he says, Inna tilka al-majalis uhibbuha, that these majalis in which we do ihya, where we revive the affair of Islam, of the Ahlul Bayt, uhibbuha. He longs for it, he yearns for it, he wishes that he could attend. And without a doubt, it is our faith and our belief and our conviction that Imam al-Mahdi, that when he returns, he will also participate in these gatherings, inshaAllah ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. These gatherings, in its truest form, they show our loyalty. They show our commitment to Abi Abdullah al-Husayn. You know, this Hubb al-Husayn that we have in our hearts, It's something really ajib. It's something which is, it's hard to describe. We can describe it in different ways, but Hubb al-Husayn is a phenomena which there's a lot of mystique surrounding it. To understand what Hubb al-Husayn is, it's something which we all have to experience. It's something which we all have to feel. It's something which we all have to live. We can read about Karbala, we can read about the incidents that happened after Karbala, but Hubb al-Husayn, this requires divine intervention. This requires Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala putting something in our hearts. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give us a blessing, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give us the greatest blessing that He can give us is Hubb al-Husayn in our hearts. There's a hadith which is narrated from Imam Sadiq, in which he says, Man aradallahu bihi khair. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to give goodness to somebody, what does He do? Does He give that person wealth, money, popularity? What does He do? Imam Sadiq says, قَذَفَ فِي قَلْبِهِ حُبَّ الْحُسَيْنِ. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plants the love of Husayn in his heart. وَحُبَّ زِيَارَتِهِ, and the love of his ziyarah in the hearts of the believers. So this majlis, these gatherings which we have, it's something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervened and He placed in our hearts. And it is our belief, it is our faith that this is a fulfillment in the dua of Lady Zahra salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. These majalis in which we gather, in which we remember her son, this was an aspiration, this was a dua that she had. Shortly after the birth of Imam al-Husayn, she went to her father Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and the Prophet began to narrate what was going to happen to her son. What was some of the calamities, some of the hardships and the trials. When Lady Zahra, when she heard this, she couldn't control herself. The hadith says, Bakat Fatima baka'an shadida. That when Rasulullah was describing the events leading up to Karbala and what was going to happen after Karbala, Lady Zahra, she began to weep, and she began to weep loudly. And then she asked, after hearing all those events, وَقَالَتْ يَا أَبَتَ مَتَى يَكُونُ ذَلِكَ. When will such an event happen? It was confusing because this time when they were in Medina, this was a time of stability. This was a time where the Prophet, he had so many followers. But what would happen to the ummah that they will now go and they will kill her son? And so she asked that, when will such an event happen? And so the Prophet responds by saying, فِي زَمَانٍ خَالٍ minni wa minki wa min aliyin. That there will be a time in which you won't be there, in which I won't be there, in which Ali ibn Abi Talib won't be there. And Lady Zahra, she began to cry even more. فَاشْتَدَّ بُكَاؤُهَا. She even began to cry more intensely. And she says, Ya abata, فَمَنْ يَبْكِي عَلَيْهِ. Then who is it that will cry for Imam al-Husayn? وَمَنْ يَلْتَزِمْ بِإِقَامَةِ الْأَزَى لَهُ. Who will go and establish these sessions this morning for Imam al-Husayn when the Ahlul Bayt aren't there? And so the Prophet gives her this promise. He says, Ya Fatima, inna nisa'i ummati yabkuna ala nisa'i ahli bayti. It says the women of our ummah, they will gather and they will remember the masa'ib and the calamities that happened to the women of the Ahlul Bayt. وَرِجَالُهُمْ يَبْكُونَ عَلَى رِجَالِ أَهْلِ بَيْتِ. And the men, they will gather and they will cry and they will remember what happened to the men in Karbala. وَيُجَدِّدُونَ الْعَزَاءِ جِيلًا بَعْدَ جِيلٍ فِي كُلِّ سَنَةٍ. And these lovers, these individuals who are attached to the Ahlul Bayt, generation after generation, and every year they will stand and they will establish the azah for Abi Abdullah al-Husayn. And then he continues, فَإِذَا كَانَ الْقِيَامَةِ. When the day of judgment comes, تَشْفَعِينِ أَنْتِ لِلنِّسَاءِ. That you will give shafa'ah, you will intercede on behalf of the women, for the women. وَأَنَا أَشْفَعْ لِلرِّجَالِ. And I will give intercession to the men. وَكُلُّ مَنْ بَكَى مِنْهُمْ عَلَى مُصَابِ الْحُسَيْنِ. And every single person among them who cries for the calamities and for the suffering of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, أَخَذْنَاهُ بِيَدِهِ وَأَدْخَلْنَاهُ الْجَنَّةِ. I will go and take his or her hand and make sure that they enter into Jannah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we are a nation, brothers and sisters, that is a fulfillment of the dua of Lady Zahra salamullahi alayha. And we make a promise and we make an oath that till the last breath, till the last beat of our hearts, that we will remember Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, that there will be this warmth in our hearts that will never become cold, that we will always remember the aza, we will always remember the calamities and suffering for Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. The tears that come from our hearts, they will never stop. Until the last day, the last moment we leave this dunya, we will cry for her child. And Karbala is our hope. Karbala is our lifeline. And through her, this majlis came about. Without her dua, without her blessings, we wouldn't have the honor to be here. So this movement of Karbala is a very profound movement. It's a very profound event that took place. It's the most crucial part of our madhab and our identity. When we look at our madhab, when we look at our school of thought, its strength doesn't come through the numbers that we have. We don't have a very large number of people. There are other groups and religious groups, there are other denominations which are much more, multifold than us. It is not due to because our wealth, it's not as if we have an abundance of resources, we have unlimited amounts of wealth in which we're able to go and establish these majalis and have this arba'een walk, and people from all over the world come and give their allegiance to Imam al-Husayn. There are other religions who have, according to some reports, upwards of $100 billion for propagating their religion. Our strength doesn't come because we're backed by a certain country, certain movements, certain ideologies are backed by a government, and they go and they publish their books and send out missionaries to all different corners of the world to push that agenda. But when it comes to our madhab, when it comes to our belief, when it comes to our school of thought, where does our strength come from? Our strength revolves around the Imam alayhi salam. Our strength revolves around attachment that we have to the Imam. The more sincere attachment we have to the Ahlul Bayt, the stronger our madhab becomes. And this is what we see. We see with such passion and such zeal that people, they go and they remember Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. They remember the Ahlul Bayt. It is this attachment to the Ahlul Bayt which gives us strength, which gives strength to our madhab. And these are these qualities which the Ahlul Bayt have. We learn from these majalis. When we enter these majalis, we hear the fada'il, we hear the masaib of the Ahlul Bayt. This is what creates that bond. This is what creates that attachment to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And in doing so, our attachment and our relation and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes stronger. And so Imam Husayn, he becomes a symbol of truth and justice. Anybody who hears the message of Imam al-Husayn, their heart becomes stirred. Tears begin to flow from their eyes. This is how powerful that movement of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn is. And it is because of these majlis that we were able to establish our identity. We were able to establish our wujud, our existence. There were movements and there were incidents throughout history where people, they came and they wanted to destroy the school of Tashayyu, the school of Ahlul Bayt. In 1800, the Wahhabis, they came and they, with an army of several thousand, they marched to Karbala. And they went and destroyed Karbala. They killed thousands of people there. And they were going to go to Najaf and they were going to wipe out the school of thought of Tashayyu. Just recently with Daesh, the same thing. Their goal and their objective was to wipe out Tashayyu from the face of this planet. But this majlis, this azad that we have, it is what kept our identity alive. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so when we come to this majlis, when we come and assess that what have we done for the last 2 months, that we spend so much time, we spend so much effort, we need to come to this very important point of reflection, that what change have we brought in ourselves? A mu'min, a believer, for 2 days they're never equal. Man istawa yawmahu fahuwa maghboon. A believer whose 2 days are equal, fahuwa maghboon, he's a loser. We've been spending 2 months and 8 days remembering Abu Abdullah al-Husayn. There needs to be some apparent improvement. There needs to be some palpable change within ourselves. This is an assessment that before we conclude this season of Azad, we ask ourselves, how did we change? Are we praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a little bit more concentration? Has our character improved? Has our faith gone up? This is an important task that we need to fulfill before the end of this month, before the end of the season of Azab. If there is one thing that we should try to change within ourselves, brothers and sisters, it is this. Is that we should not go back to our sinning ways. We should make this change within us that when we entered into the season of Azab, maybe we were doing something which was wrong, something which was impermissible. but let us make an oath to Imam al-Husayn. Let us make an oath to the shuhada of Karbala that we will no longer go back to our old ways. If we had certain bad habits, if we were quick to get angry, if we were quick to raise our voices, if we were listening to something haram, watching something which is impermissible, let us make an oath to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn that we're not going to go back to that. We should never think, and unfortunately there are people who think like this, that after 2 months and 8 days of mourning for Imam Husayn, that we have some type of credit, that we have some type of surplus, that we can go and do some things which are impermissible, and in doing so we'll be safe. This is the wrong way of thinking. Actually, after we come to this majlis of Imam al-Husayn, when it comes to sinning and disobeying the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should be further repulsed, because these were qualities and attributes of those who killed Imam al-Husayn. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to extend our lives so that we be counted among the azadar and mourners of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn in the following years. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It is the eve of 8th Rabiul Awwal, and this marks the shahadat and death of our 11th Imam, Imam al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam. Among all the Imams, the Imamat which was the shortest was the Imamat of Imam al-Hasan al-Askari. His life was only 28 years of age. Imam al-Jawad, he was killed at the age of 23 years. Imam al-Jawad's Imamat was only maybe 5 or 6 years, a little less than 6 years. And during this short period of time, Imam had a huge responsibility to the community. And the political circumstances were such where the Imam had a lot of difficulty and a lot of hardships in fulfilling this responsibility. But the important point that we can derive from the life of Imam Hasan al-Askari from his life is this, is that despite the age that we may live, that we should always try to leave a lasting impact. We shouldn't think that when we get older, we'll go and we'll do something which is impactful. Even when we're young, we can do something. We can leave a legacy behind ourselves. And this is exactly what Imam al-Askari did. One of the beautiful titles of Imam Askari is this, is that Ibn al-Hadi Walid al-Mahdi, that he is the son of Muhammad al-Hadi and he is the father of Imam al-Hujjah al-Muntadhir. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And in this very short period of Imamah, the Imam had this very crucial responsibility, which was to prepare the Muslim Ummah for a very difficult period of time, which was the absence of the Imam. And so Imam had to explain the reasoning, Imam had to explain the responsibility, Imam had to explain that what are we going to be doing in this next stage where we don't have access to the Imam. And this is while the situation is such where Imam is under constant watch. He's being monitored, he's being surveilled, he's being put in prison, he's under house arrest. It was a time of much difficulty and much political repression. And so Imam Askari's life is filled with this, but it's also fulfilling his responsibility. When Imam al-Askari, when he was placed in prison for a long period of time, for over several months, we think of Imam al-Kadhim for being in prison for most of the time. But along with Imam al-Kadhim was also Imam Hasan al-Askari, who was placed in a prison. And this was very difficult for him because he did not have access to the Shia. But the reason was that it was preparing the Shia for a time period when they don't have access to the Imam. So who do we go to for guidance? And Imam Askari, he established a system of wikala, the system of deputyship, where people can go and ask their questions from the different maraji and from the different scholars who are there. The first na'ib of Imam al-Mahdi was somebody by the name of Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amari. And this was an individual who was the first na'ib appointed and designated by the 12th Imam. And he was also a companion of Imam Hasan al-Askari. The situation was so difficult. When this companion wanted to go and see the Imam, he couldn't go and directly see the Imam. So he took on this occupation of being an oil seller. He would go and he would sell oil, and he would go to the house of Imam Askari, and he would sell oil. And when he would sell oil, he would put inside of some of the products, he would put some money, or he would put some questions, he would put some concerns of the Shia, and the Imam, he would take that. And when after a few days he would go back to the house of Imam Askari would return those questions and answer those questions, and he would give his advice. This is how difficult the time was. Imam, when he was put in prison for these long and lengthy periods of time, he still fulfilled his responsibility. And this is something important for us. No matter what our trying situation is, that we have to always fulfill our responsibility. We can never make an excuse not to fulfill our responsibility. One time, Mutawakkil placed Imam Askari in the prison of this individual by the name of Ali ibn Narmish. And this individual who was taking care of the prison, who Imam was a prisoner of, was someone who was ansabun nas, someone who harbored deep hatred against the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Not only that, he was somebody ashadduhum ala ali Abi Talib. He was somebody who was known for his torture against the Shia of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. And so when Imam was placed in his prison, he was given the command of Mutawakkil that if al-ma tasha, that do whatever you want. Torture the Imam in whatever manner you want. If you want to starve him, if you want to torture him, if you want to deny him water or food, whatever you want, you can deny him that. Imam is under his prison. But what do we find? Imam, after a little period of time, this person becomes one of the Shia of the Imam. Imam goes and is able to convince him and persuade him to abandon those ways of having animosity towards the Ahlul Bayt. And his life completely changes, where now he doesn't even look at the Imam. If he looks at the Imam, he looks at the Imam filled with affection and filled with love. This is one of the qualities that the Imam had. That when the Imam was placed in prison, he would go and he would change the hearts of people. He would be placed in a prison filled with criminals. And that place would now become a place of worship. Those prisoners who were there, they would become rehabilitated. They would leave their sinning ways and they would go and adopt the teachings of the Imam. And so we find that the Abbasid Khilafat, that they were forced to constantly move Imam from one prison to another prison. And this is because the way that the Imam, he interacted with them, was that he was able to call them to the truth. And this is something important, that this happens with our character. This happens with our personality. That more so than speaking, we should act in a manner which calls people to our madhab. Salawatullah Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Imam would be summoned to the official building, to the different rulers of the Khalifa of the time, on Mondays and Thursdays. And Imam gave explicit direction to his Shia that when you see me, don't come and don't say salam to me. And this was very difficult for the Shia. So every Monday and Thursday, Samarra became a military barracks. And because it was a military barracks, there were many soldiers there. And there were mainly soldiers there. And then when the Imam would be summoned to leave his home and go to the government offices, the Shia, they would gather in the city. And they would see the Imam walking, but they wouldn't give him salams. But the Khilafat of Mutawakkil and Mu'tamid, they knew that the Imam, that because of the Imam's presence, so many people came that the streets were congested every Monday and Thursday. And they knew that despite whatever propaganda they do against the Imam, the hearts of the Shias will always be inclined towards the Imam. One of the companions by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdul Aziz al-Balkhi, he narrates that one day he was in the city of Samarra and he stopped. And when he stopped, he saw that someone is being transported from their home towards the government offices. And he stops and he looks and he sees that it's Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. And so this was an intimidation technique that they used to do in order to apply pressure upon the Shia, upon the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt. When he saw the Imam being transported by this group, by soldiers, he's put in handcuffs, he's being transported, he saw the state of the Imam and his heart began to tremble. At that moment he says to himself, قُلْتُ فِي نَفْسِي تَرَى إِنْ سَحْتَ, that at this moment I felt like screaming. You know when a loved one of yours is going through difficulty, going through hardship, you don't want to stay in one spot. You want to scream, you want to yell, you want to raise your voice. He said, when I saw the Imam being transported with all these soldiers who were armed to the teeth, I felt like screaming out, that أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ هَذَا حُجَّةُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ فَأَعْرِفُوهُ, that this man who you're oppressing and who you're tormenting, that this is the hujjat of Allah. This is a testament of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Recognize who He is. I felt like screaming this, but I knew that if I screamed this, the response would be that qataluni, that they would kill me. And so he's watching as the Imam is getting closer and closer to him. And then as the Imam comes closer to him, فَلَمَّا دَنَا مِنِّي أَوْمَا بِإِسْبَهِ السَّبَابَ عَلَى فِيهِ أَنْ أَسْكُتْ. The Imam, he takes his hand, he puts his finger on his mouth, and he says, shh, uskut, that don't say anything, that keep quiet. And so he kept quiet, he didn't say anything. A short while later, he goes and he sees the Imam. And when the Imam sees him, the Imam tells him that discretion, that keep this matter of imama, keep this matter of your love towards Ahlul Bayt, keep it a secret. Don't go announce it, because the situation is such that you will be oppressed and they will further go and they will further oppress me. And so we understand this very important point from this incident which took place, that this imama, this wilaya, this love of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam which is there, it's not meant for everyone. There are certain requisites which need to be in a person's heart so they can have the love of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. We see one of the things that there's debates happening back and forth, trying to establish the wilaya and the khilafah and the imamat of our imam alayhim salam, and we see that there's no benefit in it, because the winner of the argument is the one who can hurl the most insults. We have to realize that our responsibility is not to go and convince the world about our beliefs and our ideology. Our faith is not contingent upon someone else who accepting it. A lot of these matters when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt, a lot of them are secrets. We're not supposed to go and expose them and divulge them. The Imam is saying, uskut, that don't say these type of things. Why? Because they don't have the prerequisites to go and accept it. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the important principles that the Imam he established during this time of his imama was that during the time of ghaiba, that we have a responsibility. And this is a very important responsibility, which is to not cause disunity or dissension. A lot of times people, they go and they cause disunity without knowing that they're causing it. And this causes a lot of harm. This destroys the social cohesion that a community has. Not only is social cohesion and unity important for the community, but it's also important for us in this process of self-reformation, in this process of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we go and we cause fitna, it causes more harm to our faith. It causes us to move away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This process of refinement, this process of purifying our nafs, it becomes completely destroyed when we go and cause disunity. A lot of times these disagreements that we have and we cause disunity, most of the time it's not because we want to call people to the truth. Most of the time it's because of our ego. We cannot let our ego cannot accept the fact that we're not able to convince the other person. And so we become adamant, we become insistent on proving our point, and what happens? It causes disunity. The Imam, he says that, إِنَّ مُدَارَةَ أَعْدَاءِ اللَّهِ مِنْ أَفْضَلِ صَدَقَةِ الْمَرْءِ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ وَإِخْوَانِهِ. He says that the greatest sadaqah that you can do for yourself and for your family, what is it? That go and do mudara, go and manage the affairs of the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't go and unnecessarily rattle the cage. Don't go and raise controversial issues. Don't go and engage in discussions which have no benefit. Don't put yourself in a position where now they can attack you relentlessly. In another hadith, the Imam, he says, قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. This is the responsibility that the Imam is giving during the time of ghaiba. That go and say good towards other people. And then he says, مُؤْمِنُهُمْ وَمُخَالِفُهُمْ. Those who are believers and those who disagree with you, those who don't believe in the same school of thought with you, go and say good things to them. أَمَّا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ فَيَبْسُطْ لَهُمْ وَجْهُهُ. That when it comes to the believers, show an extra form of kindness and affection to them. وَأَمَّا الْمُخَالِفُونَ. But when it comes to those who disagree with you, when it comes to those who believe in a different set of articles of faith, how should we talk to them? The Imam, he mentions this very important principle. فَيُكَلِّمُهُمْ بِالْمُدَارَةِ. Talk to them in a balanced manner. Talk to them in a moderate manner. And then he further elaborates to them. لِإِجْتِذَابِهِمْ إِلَى الْإِيمَانِ. That go and interact with them, but interact with them in a manner where they want to increase their iman when they see you. Don't go and always talk about controversial issues. Don't always go and insist that Imam Ali should have been the rightful Khalifa. No, go and talk about certain topics which now they want to raise their iman because of you. And don't cause disunity in the society. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the most important contributions that Imam Askari made was that he gave a set of durus, some lessons, which talked about doing tafsir of the Quran. And these were guidelines in how we begin to understand the Quran. There is a book which is attributed to him, but there's a lot of controversy whether it is his or it isn't his, Tafsir al-Imam al-Hasan al-Askari. The vast majority of scholars say that the credibility and the authenticity of this book is not established. But his students, they compiled this book, and they may have written their own notes, and they may have added some of their own thoughts, but it's not directly linked to Imam al-Hasan al-Askari. However, there was a very important principle which the Imam, he talks about. And in this principle in which Imam is giving of how do we do tafsir of the Quran, he's talking about how not to do tafsir bil right. That don't go to the Quran and understand the Quran that you want to, that whatever way that you want. There are certain principles, there are certain guidelines, there's a certain methodology which you need to adopt before you go and understand the Quran. Now this doesn't mean that we shouldn't read the Quran and that we should leave the Quran and leave it only for the scholars to talk about. No, each and every one of us have a responsibility to have a relationship with the Quran, to reflect over the Quran. But when it comes to our own opinions, we shouldn't impose upon them. Why? Because this falls under tafsir al-ray. And this was an important responsibility which the Imam fulfilled. And so we don't find in our madhab, in our school of thought, we don't find a lot of bizarre commentaries. In other schools of thought, you find many, many different tafsirs and commentaries that are there, and they're very bizarre, they're very unusual. The principle that the Imam, he taught was this, that when you read the Quran, when you reflect over the Quran, try to read the Quran in a holistic manner. Don't take one verse and cling onto it and say and establish your entire belief from this set of faith. Instead, take a verse of the Quran, compare it to other similar verses of the Quran, and see how the Quran is linked with different verses. And so, and in doing so, what happens is that you get a complete understanding of the Quran. And in order for us to do this, we require an extensive reading of the Quran. We require an in-depth relationship with the Quran. Imam, he points to this very important point that there are some verses which are figurative. There are some verses which are metaphorical. Don't take these in a literal sense. And then he goes and he recites the verses of the Quran which talk about certain verses are mutashabih and certain verses are muhkam. But what's important for us is that when we read the Quran, that we don't jump to conclusions. We try to read other tafsir, especially the tafsir of Allama Tabatabai, Tafsir al-Mizan, in which he applies this concept, Al-Quran yufassir al-Quran, where he takes a set of verses or one verse and he uses other verses to bring about its meaning. And this is an important principle which the Imam, he taught. During the time of Imam al-Askari, there was an individual by the name of Ishaq al-Kindi. And this individual, he was a scholarly person, and he set out to go and write a book in which he points out the contradictions in the Quran. He read the Quran and he saw that, in the Quran there's certain contradictions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a book and I'm going to compile all of these contradictions and I'm going to publish it and I'm going to send it out into the community, right? And so in doing so, the Imam now has a responsibility to counter this. And so he writes this, he gets busy writing this book. And as he gets busy writing this book, the news reached Imam Hasan al-Askari that such an individual is writing this book. Unfortunately, sometimes people are like that. Sometimes they like to bring something new, something novel, something innovative. They like to bring something which was never heard from before. So instead of going and consolidating our beliefs, they like to go and bring certain things which rock the boat. And so he was somebody who was argumentative. He was somebody who wanted to go and cause a lot of controversy. And the reason was because this individual, he wanted to go and establish his personality, that I'm someone who's a free thinker. I'm someone who thinks outside of the box. And so it's important for us to also realize that we don't go and sit with every alim. Every scholar, every individual who has knowledge doesn't mean that we go and we sit with such a person. There's a hadith from the Prophet where he says, "La tajlisu inda kulla alimin yad'ukum." That don't go and sit with every scholar who calls himself a scholar. Alhamdulillah, we're lucky in this community to have Sheikh Mehdi, Sheikh Amin, Sheikh Muhammad Saadi, these scholars, mashallah, who are well-read and studied well. But there are other scholars who are not like this. The Prophet, what does he say? He says, "La tajlisu inda kulli alim." Don't go and sit with every alim. And then he says, "Illa alim yad'ukum min al-khams ila al-khams." That a scholar who you go and you get knowledge from should have these 5 qualities. He should call you from these 5 things to these 5 things. And the Prophet, he continues. He says, "Min ash-shakki ila al-yaqeen." That when you go and when you sit with a scholar, that scholar should call you from shak to yaqeen, from doubt towards certainty. When you go and when you sit with him, you shouldn't walk out thinking, "Oh man, I doubt my entire faith." Is the Quran, is it complete? Is this truly a part of our faith? You shouldn't leave with that feeling of more doubt and more skepticism about your faith. When you go and when you sit with an alim, you should feel proud that this is your belief, that this is your ideology. And then the Imam says, the Prophet, he says, وَمِنَ الْكِبْرِ إِلَى التَّوَاضُعِ, that the alim that you go and you sit with, he shouldn't be an individual who's showing off. He shouldn't be an individual who's talking about his degree. I studied under this ayatullah, I studied under that ayatullah, I have this many books and this many articles. You shouldn't go and sit with that type of alim. An alim that you should sit with should call you from kibr, from arrogance, to tawadu, to humility. And then he says, وَمِنَ الرِّيَاءِ إِلَى الْإِخْلَاصِ. And when you go and when you sit with an alim, that he should call you from showing off to ikhlas, to sincerity. Unfortunately, we see this. Just recently when I had traveled, there was another alim who was speaking, and he was putting these demands. He's like, I want different lighting over here. I want a special camera. I want one camera from this angle, one camera from that angle. And he said, I have thousands and thousands of viewers across the world. Make sure the quality of the majlis, which is high, the audio should be like this, the mic should be like this. All of these things, that's not what the Prophet is saying. He says, مِنَ الرِّيَاءِ إِلَى الْإِخْلَاصِ. A person shouldn't be going and self-promoting themselves. A person should have sincerity. وَمِنَ الْعَدَاوَةِ إِلَى النَّصِيحَةِ. That a scholar in his nature, how should he be? He should call people from animosity. He should call people from rancor towards what? Towards good advice, towards admonishment, from disunity to unity. Sometimes you go and when you talk to an advice, if you get advice from a scholar, it's as if he's taunting you. Such an alim we're not supposed to go and sit with. Rather, we sit with an alim, we sit with a scholar who's giving you good advice. وَمِنَ الرَّغْبَةِ إِلَى الزُّهْدِ. That an alim should be such that he should call you from abandoning this world towards zuhud, towards piety, towards God-weariness. You know, one time I was sitting with a scholar and he was saying, I have a $2,000 watch that I'm wearing. Okay, what's the benefit of your $2,000 watch? What is it going to do for you? Such an alim we shouldn't sit with. The Prophet says, وَمِنَ الرَّغْبَةِ. He should be calling you away from the dunya towards the akhirah. So Ishaq al-Kindi, he started compiling this book about the different inconsistencies in the Quran. And so he took different verses. One of the verses that he took was فَيَوْمَ إِذٍ لَا يُسْأَلْ أَنْ ذَنْبِهِ إِنسٌ وَلَا جَانٌ. In Surah Rahman we recite this verse that a person will not be asked about their actions and their sins in this dunya. And then he brings another verse of the Quran. He says, وَقِفُوهُمْ إِنُّهُمْ مَسْئُولُونَ. That stop them. They are going to be questioned. They're going to be interrogated. So he says, look, these verses, they contradict one another. Why? Because the first verse says what? The first verse says, La yus'al. They're not going to be interrogated. They're not going to be questioned about what they have done. And then this other verse says, stop them. Innuhum mas'ulun. So he looks at this as a contradiction. Not understanding that other verses of the Quran, they explain this. Another verse in the Quran says, Fi yawmin kana miqdaru khamsina alfa sana. That the day of judgment is 50,000 years. And there's different stages. Some stages we're not going to be questioned. Other stages of on the day of judgment, we're going to be asked questions. We're going to be asked about our wealth. We're going to be asked about our children. We're going to be asked about our salat. We're going to be asked about our different responsibility. Just because we have one verse which apparently seems like a contradiction, don't take it and hold on to it and establish your entire viewpoint from there. Take the Quran in a holistic manner. Allow other verses of the Quran to explain those verses. And so these students, they came to Imam Askari, and they said to him that our teacher is going and doing this. He's writing a book, and in this book, he's compiling the inconsistencies. And so the Imam says to them, he said, isn't there someone who's brave amongst you? Isn't there someone who's Rashid? Isn't there someone who's enlightened enough to go and challenge your teacher and tell him to not write this and question some of the conclusions which he's coming up with? And so they tell the Imam that, we're his students and he's much more learned than us. How can we go and how can we challenge him? And so the Imam, he gives this very beautiful principle. And this is a principle that we can apply in our lives, that how do we convince other people? Imam says to him, to those students, فَصِرْ إِلَيْهِ. Go to them, go to him. وَتَلَطَّ فِي مُعَانَسَتِهِ وَمَعُونَتِهِ عَلَى مَا هُوَ سَبِيلِهِ. Please say salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Imam saying you want to convince him. What's the manner of going and convincing other people? Before you go and argue with him and have a disagreement with him, go and connect to his heart. Go and make a connection with his heart.
After you make a connection with his heart, then you go and you raise this issue. And this is a very basic prophetic principle that we have. That first win their hearts, then you can go and win their minds. Nabi Saleh and the other prophets, they were like this. Nabi Saleh, the verse in the Quran says, Ya Saleh, qad kunta fina marjuwan qabla hadha. That, oh Nabi Saleh, the people used to say to him, that before you went and started propagating this religion of Tawheed, marjuwan, you were liked, you were beloved to us. Right? What happened that all of a sudden you began to preach, the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the monotheistic principles that we have. That means before Nabi Saleh, before he went and called the people towards his religion, he first taught them akhlaq. He first taught them morals. Our Prophet was like this. For 40 years, what did he do? He went and he established himself as an individual in the community who cares about the people. Someone who was ameen, someone who was sadiq. He went and he captured their hearts. He first showed them for 40 years how to be a human being, how to be an upright individual, how to have principles, how to have morals. And then after 40 years did he begin to call them towards Islam. And so the Imam's advice is this, that before you go and debate and dispute with him, go and show some compassion to him. Go and show your care and show your respect to him. Go and show kindness. And so this is the way that we're supposed to go and convince people. And this is a very beautiful example that we have, that one of our scholars, Allama Hilli, alayhi rahmah, he lived about 700 years ago. Allama Hilli is the pride of Shia scholarship. His contributions to our Shia madhab are numerous when it comes to usul and hadith, this classification of hadith that we have. It comes from Allama Hilli. And so Allama Hilli's his full name is Abu Mansur Jamaluddin Al-Hasan ibn Yusuf ibn Mutahhar. And you'll understand why I'm saying his entire name, Ibn Mutahhar. And so he has a book, and in this book what he does is that during that time, some of the more extreme ideologies began to go and attack the Shia madhab. And so he writes this book, Minhaj al-Karama fi Ma'rifat al-Imama, a book which talks about imama, which talks about Ahlul Bayt and their rank and their position. A contemporary of Allama Hilli was someone by the name of Ibn Taymiyyah. And so Ibn Taymiyyah, he wrote a book, Minhaj al-Sunnah. And in this book, he writes all these insults against the Shia madhab. When Allama Hilli was writing this book, he wrote this book in which he addressed Ibn Taymiyyah with respect. As an individual who was learned, who was scholarly, he talked to him with his title. However, when Ibn Taymiyyah wrote his book, he began insulting Allama Hilli, he began insulting the school of Ahlul Bayt. And when he would talk about Allama Hilli, he would change his name from Ibn al-Mutahhar to Ibn al-Munajjas, the son of the one who is Munajjas. And we find that this was the way of him doing these type of things. And this is something which is unacceptable. Anyone who's connected to the spring of Islam, anyone who's connected to the teachings of the Quran, knows that this goes against the basic teachings of Islam, goes against the basic akhlaq, that you don't go and change someone else's name in this manner. Just because someone disagrees with you doesn't give you the right to go and insult them, doesn't give you the right to go and mock them from Ibn al-Mutahhar to Ibn al-Munajjas. And so if you have a disagreement with somebody, don't resort to this level of insulting one another. And it's not suitable for someone who went and attained a level of scholarship to resort to these type of attacks. It's narrated that Allama Hilli went to Hajj. And when he went to Hajj, he comes across Ibn Taymiyyah. Allama Hilli was older than him. He recognized Ibn Taymiyyah, but Ibn Taymiyyah didn't know who he was. They sat down and they began having a discussion. And Allama Hilli was very well versed when it came to Shia matters, Sunni matters, when it came to Hadith, Quran, Tafsir, when it came to the fiqh of the different madhahib of the schools of Islam. He knew it very well. And so he's having this discussion with Ibn Taymiyyah, and Ibn Taymiyyah finds that Allama Hilli, that he's an eloquent scholar, he's refined, he's a mountain of knowledge. He's like, who is this individual who I've never heard of? And so at the end of the conversation, Allama Hilli, he stands up to walk away, and Ibn Taymiyyah says to him that, Man takun, who are you? And so he says to him, Man tusammihi Ibn al-Munajjas. I'm the one who you call Ibn al-Munajjas. You insulted me, but now this is the knowledge that I have that I'm presenting in front of you. So we see that the scholars of the Ahlul Bayt, they applied this principle. That when we go and we talk to those who disagree with us, we first get into their hearts where they can come and where they can praise us. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this is a very beautiful principle that we have. that when you want to call someone towards your position, when you want to call someone towards your beliefs, first go into their hearts. First say something nice to them, be respectful to them, smile at them, and then talk and have this discussion. And so these students, they went back to their teacher, Ishaq al-Kindi. And when they went back to Ishaq al-Kindi, they went and they showed respect, they showed reverence to him. And then afterwards, they fulfilled that advice which the Imam told him. They told those students. The Imam said that first go, show some love and respect to your teacher, and ask him, this opinion which you reached, is this the only opinion which is there, or could there be another opinion there? And so when the two students went to their teacher and said to him that this opinion that you have arrived at, this Quran is filled with so many contradictions, is this the only valid opinion, or are there other possible opinions? And so he asked the students, can you repeat this one more time? And so the student said to him that this opinion, this conclusion that you've reached, is this the only one, or is it possible that there are other opinions? And so naturally, a person who's scholarly knows that his opinion isn't the only one, otherwise he sounds as if he's dogmatic. And he says, who told you this? These are not words that come from you. And he said, no, we're asking you from ourselves. He said, no, you are my students, I know you very well. From where did you go and get this statement? And then they tell the teacher, Ishaq al-Kindi, that we went to Imam Askari and we told him, and this is the advice which he gave us. And this is how Imam, he went, and he thwarted this great fitna which could have happened in the community of a book filled with of contradictions in the Quran. Sallallahu alayki ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayki ya ibna Rasulillah. Brothers and sisters, let us bring our hearts and souls to the city of Samarra. What a city Samarra was. The city of Samarra is not like Makkah, it's not like Medina. The city of Samarra is a city of banishment. It's a city of isolation. It's a city of seclusion. It's a city of difficulty for the Ahlul Bayt. In the year 260, Mu'tamad, he places some poison in some fruits and he gives it to the Imam. It's narrated that this poison which was given to Imam al-Askari, that it was such that it took several days for Imam to become sick. Imam, day after day, his health was debilitating. For days, Imam wasn't feeling well. When another Imam Hassan was poisoned, the second Imam was poisoned, we have reports that this poison which was given was very fast acting. That as soon as Imam Hassan took that poison, that immediately he became sick. He was throwing up, he was coughing blood. But that poison which was given to Imam Hassan al-Askari, it was a very slow acting poison. And the reason was what? The reason was that as Imam gets sicker and sicker, that the son of Imam al-Askari, Imam al-Mahdi, will come and see his father, and we will be able to capture his son. We find that these days, Imam Hassan al-Askari, his health is deteriorating. He's going through excruciating pain. He's becoming weaker and weaker. Imam al-Mahdi is only a boy of 5 years of age when his father dies. He's commanded by his father that, oh my son, do not come to the home. In those final days, Imam Askari, he feels this intense thirst in his body. Imam is on his deathbed when he calls one of his servants and says to bring some water. She brings some water, but before the Imam can drink some water, Imam, he falls unconscious. When he regains his consciousness, he tells a servant to go and bring the 5-year-old. This 5-year-old, it is Imam al-Mahdi. Imam is brought into the room. When Imam Askari sees this 5-year-old innocent child in front of him, Imam holds on to him and embraces him and begins to cry. Perhaps he cried that this child is soon going to be orphaned. Perhaps he cried at the innocence of this child. Perhaps he cried at how isolated and how secluded this boy will be, how few his helpers will be. Imam begins to cry and intends. He says, Ya bunayya fa anta sahib al-zaman, wa anta al-mahdi, wa anta hujjatallahi ala arde. Imam takes a child and brings him to his chest. He kisses him and he gives him the final wasiyah. After he gives the final wasiyah, the sound begins to fade from the mouth of the Imam. ثُمَّ سَكَنَ أَنِينُهُ. Imam's breathing, it slows down. وَعَرَقَ جَبِينُهُ. The forehead of the Imam begins to sweat. وَغَمَّضَ عَيْنَيْهِ. Imam's eyes are opening and closing. وَمَدَّ يَدَيْهِ وَرِجْلَيْهِ. Imam, he straightens his feet and his hands. وَفَاضَتْ رُوحُهُ الطَّاهِرَةِ. And Imam's pure soul leaves the body. The Caliph Mu'tamid, in order to hide his crime, he comes to the janazah of the Imam. As the body of Imam al-Askari Askari is placed there. The people are waiting to see who's going to recite the namaz janazah on the Imam. The brother of Imam Askari, Jafar al-Kadhab, he steps forth. When all of a sudden a boy of 5 years of age, he steps up and told his uncle to move away because only an Imam can lead the funeral prayer of Imam. That boy led the prayer of his father, and then he went inside the house. Mu'tamid and his soldiers chased the boy inside the house. But when they went inside the house, they could not find him. Imam was buried in that same house. On this night, we extend our condolences to the Imam of our time on the shahadat of his father. We say to the Imam that our hearts, they express sadness and grief upon your father's death. Ya Sahib al-Zaman, it isn't easy to lose a father at such a young age. You were merely 5 years of age when your father was snatched away. O Imam, the most difficult tragedy is for a child to bid farewell to his father. A child to become orphan is the most difficult things. But for us, we know how many children of the Ahlul Bayt have become orphan. Let us remember another orphan child who lost her father and became an orphan. But her father was not poisoned in the home. Her father was killed. No, her father was slaughtered on the battlefield by thousands of enemies. Her father, they shot arrows and they struck him with swords. Her father, they threw rocks at his body and spears were thrown at him. Imam's daughter not only had to see this, but she had to see the killing of her cousins and her brothers and her uncles. But it did not end here. She had to see and witness the most gruesome crime, which they took the dead bodies of the shuhada and trampled them with the hooves of the horses. The bodies are left without any covering under the sun. But this was not enough, because the enemies, they came and removed the heads of the shuhada and placed them in front of the women of Ahlul Bayt. She has to witness all of this, and then she becomes a captive. She's taken from Karbala to Kufa and from Kufa to Sham. One night, this orphan of Husayn falls asleep in the prison of Damascus. When she sees her father in a vision, Imam says to her, "Oh my daughter, it is time for you to come back to me." When she wakes up, she begins to cry and cry. Her cries become so loud that the guards could not bear to hear the cries of Sakina. They go and they bring the head of her father to Sakina. She takes the head of her father and she's startled because this head resembles someone who she knows very well. This head is resembling so similar to her father, yet it is so different. She cried and cried when she saw the head of her father. She took her small hands and rubbed the cheeks and the face of her father. She cries out, "Ya abata, man dha alladhi qadhabaka bidama'ik?" "Oh my father, who has made your beard red with your blood? Oh my father, why is your face soaked with your own blood? This was the face that I used to rub and kiss." "Ya abata, man dha alladhi qata'a waridak?" "Oh my father, who has cut the veins from your neck? Who has detached your head from your body?" "Ya abata, your head is here, but where is your body?" "Ya abata, man dha alladhi aytamani ala sighri sinni?" "Oh my father, who has made me an orphan at such a young age?" She holds the head of her father and she cries the whole night. She wipes and she cleans the head of her father. She kisses the head of her father and she finally falls asleep. The women, they realize that Sakina has finally is resting. When Imam al-Sajjad comes to his younger sister, he places his hand on her body and he recites, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." "Oh my sister, you wanted to go back to the city of Medina, but we have to leave you in this prison of Sham." "Sakina, how much you wanted to go back and to Karbala and see your father. You want to go back to your home country, to your home city. But Sakina, we have to leave you in the city of Sham." When the Ahlul Bayt, when they're finally leaving the city of Sham, as they're leaving, Lady Zainab, she goes to the Imam and asks the Imam for permission. "Can I go once more into the prison of Sham?" She goes back to the prison of Sham. She goes to the grave of her amana. She goes to the grave of the trust which was left by her brother. And she says, "Sakina, where are you? We are now returning. We are no longer prisoners. Zainab, she comes back to the city of Karbala. She comes to the grave of her brother. She says, Ya Imam, I will tell you about everything which has happened to us in Kufa and Sham. But my brother, do not ask about the amana which you left me. Do not ask about the amana which you entrusted me with. That amana which you had left me with is buried in the city of Sham. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Matam Husayn.
तक है ज़बानों पे अलमदार अलमदार किस शान से बाबा का लौं तूने उठाया किस शान से बाबा का लौं तूने उठाया मस्तीज़ा छिदा लौट के तू घर नहीं आया मस्तीज़ा छिदा लौट के तू घर नहीं आया ऐ शेर जवान पे सरे हैदर कज़ार
My back is broken, Akbar. Come home to your Imam. Akbar, my Akbar. Akbar, my Akbar. Akbar, my Akbar. Akbar, Akbar. Akbar, my Akbar. My back is broken, Akbar. Come home to your Imam. Akbar, my Akbar. Akbar, my Akbar. Akbar. Ammu will bring the water. Sakina tells her Asghar. My flag bearer has fallen. Why must I lose you now too? My back is broken, Akbar. Come home to your Imam. Akbar, my Akbar, my Akbar, my Yusuf's among the wolves now. My son's nowhere to be found. My son's nowhere to be found. My thirst to see you once more. Who stole the sight from my eyes? My back is broken, Akbar. Come home to your Imam. Akbar, Akbar. Akbar, my. What's this you hide in your chest? Who gifted you the spearhead? Who gifted you the spearhead? The scent of death has come now. Why must you break my heart now? My back is broken, Akbar. Come home to your Imam, Akbar. Akbar, my Akbar, my. Have mercy on your mother. How much is she to suffer? How much is she to suffer? Layla was in the desert. She's clinging to your pieces. My back is broken, Akbar. Come home to your Imam, Akbar. छः महीने वाले तुझको मेरा सलाम असगर हाय असगर असगर हाय असगर हाय असगर ऐ शाहिदी के दिल ऐ रूह कल्ब मादर ऐ रूह कल्ब मादर ऐ तिश्ना काम मुज़तर ऐ बेज़ुबान असग़र ऐ 6 महीने वाले तुझको मेरा सलाम असग़र असग़र तशना लबी पे तेरी गिरिया है ये खुदाई गिरिया है ये खुदाई मज़लूमियत ने तेरी इंसानियत जगाई ऐ 6 महीने वाले तुझको मेरा सलाम असग़र असग़र हाय असग़र सूखे लबों पर तूने जिस दम ज़ुबां फिराई जिस दम ज़ुबां फिराई सर को झुका के रोया दुश्मन का हर सिपाही ऐ 6 महीने वाले तुझको मेरा सलाम असग़र अलविदा 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 ऐ हुसैन अलविदा 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 ऐ हुसैन अलविदा अलविदा
सदाए फुगा और ये मजलिसें, इस सदाए फुगा और ये मजलिसें, मातम नौह और गम की ये ज़ीनतें, मातम नौह और गम की ये ज़ीनतें। चाहता है ये दिल यूं ही कायम रहे, चाहता है ये दिल यूं ही कायम रहे, चाहता है ये दिल यूं ही कायम रहे, चाहता है ये दिल यूं ही कायम रहे। फटता है दिल किस तरह ये कहे अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन। तेरे मेहमान है आखिरी ये सलाम, मेहमान है आखिरी ये सलाम, तुझ पे कुर्बान है आखिरी ये सलाम, कुर्बान है आखिरी ये सलाम, शाह ज़ीशान है आखिरी ये सलाम, शाह ज़ीशान है आखिरी ये सलाम, दिल है वीरान है आखिरी ये सलाम, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन। बख्श दे हो गई हो जो कोई खता, बख्श दे हो गई हो जो कोई खता, हक की खिदमत न हमसे अदा हो सका, हक की खिदमत न हमसे अदा हो सका, गम यही है ना जी भर के मातम किया, गम यही है ना जी भर के मातम किया, गम यही है ना जी भर के मातम किया, हम यही है ना जी भर के मातम किया, तेरी खातिर ना क्यों अपना सर दे दिया, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन। गर्जिए साल भर फिर करेंगे ये गाम, गर्जिए साल भर फिर करेंगे ये गाम, रोएंगे फिर तेरे गम में मिलकर बहार, रोएंगे तेरे गम में मिलकर बहार, और अगर मर गए तो ये होगा ना, 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 हाय अफसोस जी भर के रोए ना, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा 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 है हुसैन, अलविदा है हुसैन है हुसैन, अलविदा अलविदा है हुसैन है हुसैन, अलविदा अलविदा है शहे मशरक़ैन, अलविदा अलविदा है शहे मशरक़ैन, अलविदा बिलते अहमद के नूरे الوداع بنت احمد کے نور عین الوداع ہے مجاہد کے لب پر یہ بین الوداع 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 ہے حسین الوداع الوداع الوداع
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
Another salawat, please.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.